Welcome to the Gridiron Unfiltered podcast, powered by Recon Sports, the show where we take a deep dive into the world of sports performance. I'm your host, Danny Davis, and just a quick side note before we get started, I want to note that the Gridiron Unfiltered is now on Spotify, so if you're like me and that's where you listen, go check it out. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a topic that's often overlooked in sports performance, and that's the mental game, how cognitive performance impacts physical performance. We spend a lot of time on this show breaking down strength metrics, speed outputs, and how the body works under load. But behind all of that is the brain, the control center. It drives our habits, filters our perception of the world, and impacts everything from energy to focus and recovery. And that's what we're exploring today. Joining me is someone who's been at the forefront of helping people understand their role of their thinking that plays into their performance. Dave Blanchard is the founder and CEO of the Augmandino Companies and is a partner at Team Brave. He's the author of multiple books and the co-creator of the Habit Finder and Habit Finder Health Assessments, tools that have helped over 200,000 people better understand how their thoughts shape their outcomes. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Danny. Great to be with you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we talk a lot about sports science on this show all the time, and it's a big role in college football today. You know, from kinesiology, biomechanics, recovery, there's so much focus on how the body works. One muscle group connects to another, tight hamstrings leading to lower back pain. You know, it's studied inside and out. But I don't think what's talked enough, and most people don't have a deep understanding of, is the brain. And for me, it's easy to think of the brain as maybe a solid unit, one piece of the puzzle, but in reality, it's made up of so many different moving parts. And what blew my mind was realizing that based off of how you perceive a situation, your brain literally releases chemicals that affect your energy, affect your focus, emotions, how you perceive and experience the world. So Dave, can you walk us through just how complex really the brain really is, and how it's not just one organ with a function, but rather a constantly moving system that responds to our thoughts, habits, and environment in real time?
Well, it's fascinating, Danny, that when we have a thought process that starts to develop in the brainstem, moves up on the diencephalon, then moves up into the limbic brain, and then to the cortex, and then it comes out, it's been bouncing off of trauma triggers and stress responses from things that have occurred in our lives. And most recently, the neuroscientists are telling us even epigenetically, which are experiences from those before us, passed down through our DNA. So some of those trauma triggers aren't ours. They belong to our predecessors. And then when they come out of our subconscious, the latest research is telling us we're unaware of 90% of those thoughts. That's kind of scary. If you're trying to be an elite athlete and you're unaware of what you're thinking until it's too late or it's already taken you out, that's a real challenge. This is really where it starts. It's in the mind game. You could have a perfectly defined body. I'm thinking of a 5-star athlete, major university. Junior throws just a bunch of interceptions. Well, the coach called me in and said, what can we do? And I said, let's do a habit finder assessment and measure his habits of thinking and see if we can find part of the core issue. What we discovered, and it led to a lot of wonderful research on elite athletes, that elite athletes from the time they were very young, performance was their source of self-worth. When your self-worth is based on your performance and the performance doesn't go well, what happens to your own worth? So when this quarterback was throwing an interception, he would go back to the bench, and at the deepest, richest dialogue we have inside our head is with ourselves about ourselves. And there would be a devastating dialogue regarding worth and worthiness, ability, his character, the value of his ideas, and especially the value of his contribution, and past mistakes, which was the interception from last quarter, and would just be so devastated. And the cortisol surges in the body, the release of cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which is released to heal wounds and speed up metabolism, the activation of the amygdala, the fight or flight center, the shutting down of this prefrontal cortex, which is one of the most energy-rich parts of the brain, empathy, practical judgment, common sense. The offense is back up again. He walks out in that mindset. What are the chances he's going to throw another interception?
Very high.
Very high. When we discovered this, we began to work on what we could do to strengthen his self-worth so that he had an intrinsic value for himself as a human being, regardless of performance. When that became successful in his senior year, he had a wonderful senior year, threw a lot of touchdowns and not nearly as many, like a third as many interceptions. I mean, it was a significant shift. And when he did, he was aware of what was happening. So he went to the sidelines and it was, hey, that one's on me. Or we need to run that route just a little differently. Remember when we talk about when this person's coming up here, you do this instead of that? Oh, yes. Okay. Everybody got this? Okay, let's go out and do this again. They would go out and they would do better.
Interesting. So you mentioned he took the habit finder assessment to kind of really see where he put his self-worth in. And I took the habit finder assessment, and I had the privilege of walking through it one-on-one with you, and you personally coached me through it and really helped me see areas in my life that I wasn't necessarily seeing clearly on. I had a distorted perception of it because of how I tied things to performance and all these different areas in my life. And honestly, folks, it was one of the best coaching experiences I've had. And so for the listeners, I want to give you this context to let you know where I'm coming from. And, you know, when the habit finder, the score is say 80 out of 100, and you communicated that to me by saying you're seeing 80% clear in this category. Can you walk us through and the listeners through what seeing clear really means and how someone might think they're seeing clearly in one facet when in fact they're not?
Sure. And that clarity is addressed in 6 primary areas. How clear are you when you're thinking about people, tasks, structure, in terms of how you'd like your life to be, how it's actually showing up in the dialogue you have with yourself? Clarity is a really interesting topic because we have the capacity as a human being to be 100% clear. That's when we're on our very best behavior in a situation where we will want to be aware of everything around us. Chances are we're thinking a lot clearer in that setting. Now, it may be exhausting because we may have some habits of thinking that aren't clear. So I'll give you the premise. Here it is. I wrote a book called The Observer's Chair. It's about a concept, well, it's a principle that's unique to a human being. It's called metacognition. That's a big word, but it just means the ability to step back and reflect on our own thinking. In that book, I said, okay, here you are in the observer's chair of your life. This is the very best version of you. You also have some habits of thinking out here in front of you. Just look at them. We get to observe them. Is that habit of thinking in alignment with the best version of myself? Or is it developed some bad habits? And what happens if I surrender my free will to it? It's a key piece. I surrender my free will to it. I get up out of this chair, I walk over and I sit in that chair of that unhealthy habit of thinking. I'll give you an example. Maybe this is the chair that determines my primary motivation for life. Do I do things because I want to, get to, and choose to? Do I act on my own moral authority, doing the next right thing for the right reason? That's being self-directed. My habit of thinking, however, may want me to be motivated by have to, need to, should, must, even fear of consequences if I don't. It's like strapping on a backpack full of bricks and just dragging them through the day. If I get out of my chair of being self-directed and I sit in the chair of that unhealthy habit of thinking, and I go through the day with obligatory energy, I'm going to be exhausted. The work that needs to be done, literally needs to be done, have to, need to, should, must, becomes boring, mundane, burdensome, repetitive, and hard. I remember a tackle that I dealt with. That was his primary motivation. I said, tell me about practice. What's it like for you? And it was like boring, mundane, burdensome, repetitive, and hard. It just, he went through the motions. He did what had to be done. I said, what would happen if you made the decision to sit in the observer's chair and you went into practice with want to, get to, and choose to? How would you do those drills differently? How would you show up differently? Well, we gave him a process to make that shift so he more consciously could be in the observer's chair when it came to his motivation for practice, and he showed up totally different in practice. The coach saw the difference in how he showed up in practice. That would just be an example. So clarity is the clarity of your habits of thinking. Each of those areas I mentioned, there are 6, and each one of them has 6 habits of thinking. If they've got all kinds of really nasty habits and I surrender to them, chances are things aren't going to go very well because they're not very clear. I can be clear if I choose to be. That's how it works. And I love this, Danny, because what it means is nobody's broken. They're not our habits. These are just habits. With metacognition, that uniquely human gift, we can step back and choose to think differently. And if we choose differently, watch this, choose differently, choose differently, choose differently, I start to develop a new neural pathway in my brain, a new habit of thinking, and the brain beautifully synaptically prunes. It prunes off the bad habit. And all of a sudden, I'm actually thinking differently. This is called self-improvement. This is self-improvement. Self-improvement isn't listening to a podcast or going to a coaching session or reading a book. It's actually choosing to think differently in a moment. That's the beautiful part. So clarity is, my habit's not clear, but I can choose to think differently and create a new and healthy habit of thinking that now supports me in my processes in life. Wow, what a great concept. Neuroplasticity in the brain. We have the ability to actually change how we're thinking. Clarity just tells us, how are our habits doing? Now, I remember distinctly, Danny, you had some really powerful habits. There were some areas in your assessment that were genius-level thinking. That's also great to discover, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I thought I was kind of good here. Yeah. Own this one, Danny. Own this one. Don't have any doubt about it. Use this gift fully. Now, over here, let's take a look at this one, because this one could take just a little extra effort. Let's go through the principle and the practice and the process for shifting this habit of thinking, and do so until it's a new habit. Then we prune off the bad one. We're a new person.
That's right. And folks, I'll kind of go into some of my results a little bit. You know, where I was really off the charts with was visualizing something that hasn't even happened yet. Get all these brain blasts of ideas, and it's just, my brain is firing. I'm feeling my cloud 9, and I could literally see it before it happens, and I get these visions. Well, that was something I was really good at, but something I was lacking in was the self-worth and the how I speak to myself internally. And we were really able to now look at this. And one of the key things and one of those key habits was not necessarily visualizing, but fantasizing. Maybe you go into fantasy a lot. And I was asking Dave about what that meant. It's, you know, sometimes maybe I'll get a call from a college with Recon Sports, and I'll start, visualizing what that call might lead into and getting in their program and showing them how they can unlock their data to make these decisions. And I'm in this big fantasy when all I have is this one call. But now I'm in this fantasy world and I'm envisioning it and I'm feeling it. But now my self-worth is tied to my performance. And, you know, that's natural. A lot of people are, you know, with football and sports and the Army, West Point, it's tied to my performance. Well, I was just living in this fantasy world and I'm tying my performance to it because I can really see it, to where now that doesn't happen. Now that phone call didn't lead the way that I wanted it to go. And now my self-worth is plummeting because I'm tying it to this fantasy land. While I can see it, I only have the facts in front of me, and to not go past those facts, just stay in the reality, still visualize it, but there's a systematic process that needs to happen. And until I reach each one of those knots in that process, I can't go into fantasy world. As fun as it is and as creative and my brain's blasting when I go there, I really look at this now as part of my life of, hey, is this a fantasy, or do I have the information to really make this assumption yet? And one of my favorite parts going through this test or this assessment with Dave was it's data driven. You know, this wasn't like a personality quiz or a gut feeling session. You know, Dave wasn't coaching me based off of assumptions or if he's known me for years. We had just met, but he was still able to speak with incredible accuracy of what I was experiencing in my life. And a lot of it is math based, the scores, the structures, the patterns, and it made it feel so objective and so credible that it wasn't just a theory. It was something backed by something much deeper. And Dave, you mentioned to me that parts of it was built on a Nobel Prize nominated mathematical science. So can you talk to me a little bit about the math of what goes into the habit finder and kind of what's going on underneath the hood of it?
It is deductive, which means it's all mathematically driven. There's no subjective part. It's totally objective. That's unusual because most of the assessment world starts at personality. What are your strengths? Are you an ISNF? Are you a high D or a low C? Or, you know, and those are very powerful tests for personality. The question is, do we want to spend our life managing our personality or somebody else's? Or do we want to become the best version of ourselves? This actually goes back further to the headwaters where the thought comes up out of the subconscious before we're even aware of it. Before it pricks our emotions and those emotions get memorized, Dispenza says that's what makes up our personality and then our behavioral traits and our actions and eventually our results. If we don't like our results, don't go back to our personality. Let's go back to what's driving the personality, the habits of thinking. The math that drives this was developed at the University of Tennessee. Robert Hartman, it's a formal mathematical science. Dr. Hartman, brilliant. Oh my goodness, what a brilliant scientist. Mathematician, a philosopher, had a Juris Doctorate, spoke numerous languages. Just honored to be a part of his work. We've taken his mathematics. We've spent 25 years and $3 million perfecting it because it was very complex, because we're very complex. How do we take this mathematics from this genius and make it something that people can understand, that we can actually begin to apply? And that's what we've done, is take the math to do that. And so the assessment is totally deductive, totally math-driven. That's why I can say with great confidence to Danny, have you ever viewed yourself as a vivid visualizer? Oh yeah? Let's talk about what... I knew where to look because the habit showed me that he was way off the charts in terms of his capacity to vividly visualize. That's what the math does for us. This isn't a feel-good experience. With this one exception, I said it once a few moments ago, we are not our thoughts. I wasn't finding what's good or bad in Danny. Danny's priceless. He's unique. He's a human being. What we were looking at was his habits of thinking. He and I we're looking at them to find out which ones served him and which ones don't serve him, and how he might shift them so that he could be the best version of himself more often. Get in the observer's chair sooner. Stay here longer. But driven by Nobel Prize nominated mathematics, which is really kind of fun. And it's, frankly, we've done this a couple 100,000 times. It's not like the whole world knows about it yet. But that's our plan, get this out into the world so this becomes the new mainstream way of viewing people. The challenge with this, for almost anyone, is that the work isn't going to a session for coaching. The work occurs in the pivotal moments when we're thinking, when we're making the decisions. That's work. That's real work. And not everybody's ready to do real work. And with your permission, Danny, you touched on my soapbox. You and I share a thought process in common, the ability to vividly visualize. Would it be okay if we explored that just for a minute?
Please.
Okay. Danny has an enormous gift to vividly visualize. Now we're visualizing this dream, this thing we want to create. Can we separate fantasy from a dream? Because there's a difference. A fantasy is just something we want. The dream is something we're willing to pay the price to create. And there's a big difference, because in the world in which we live today, there seems to be a proclivity, a natural negative tendency to want to be easier and less stressful. And if we have this gift, which a lot of athletes have this gift, they'll go into the future and start to imagine what it's going to be like when they get out of high school, when they get out of college, when they're in professional football. That's not necessarily bad. It's just that with this habit of thinking, it starts to release dopamine and norepinephrine to their sympathetic nervous system. Euphoric drug. It creates a construct, a mental construct, which we would call an expectation, etymologically a concrete condition for happiness. Now we bring that into the present, and anytime something doesn't happen like that, we get to have an autonomic response in our body. It's the antithesis of dopamine and norepinephrine. It's cortisol surges. Get a cortisol surge. That's a stress hormone. It's released in the body to heal wounds, to speed up metabolism, because the body is so committed to the vivid visualization that it's there to protect it from being stolen. Imagine that. So the body goes into this autonomic, more than automatic, autonomic response to protect it. So we get the cortisol surge. Then the amygdala gets activated, that little almond-shaped thing in our limbic brain, and it starts to centralize all the energy from the brain into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, starting with our prefrontal cortex. I mentioned that a moment ago. Empathy, practical judgment, common sense. It drains it. We're left emotionally paralyzed. Athletes can't afford to be in this space when performance is the key indicator of their value as an athlete, not as a human being, as an athlete. But this happens all the time with athletes, constantly discouraged because it didn't turn out the way they wanted to. My message to athletes is really simple. Let's get clear on that which you want to create. And then we come back to the present. Where am I? Then we're going to start working on the millimeters of improvement. Personally, I'm a sophomore in high school. I'm 5'10", 150 pounds, and I run a 5'3", 40-yard dash. It's like, I wasn't very big, but I was slow, right?
Right.
I start practicing principles at that point. I want to be running in the mid to mid-range fours. If I wanted to play college football, that was going to be a requirement. I also needed to be bigger. So you set a millimeter, 5'3" to 5'2", 5'2" to 5'1", 5'1" to 5, 5 to 4.9 to 4.8 to 4.7, etc. And what do? You get an inspired idea. I actually, Danny, I ran track, but I ran with the long distance runners because I found there was a relationship between me running long distance and getting the strength to run a 40-yard dash for me. May not be for everybody, but for me. I trimmed more off of that 40-yard dash my senior year of high school, running long distance. I ran the 440, but I ran with the 2-milers and the 1-milers, those guys that were really putting and pounding the pavement because it did something to my speed. That's how an athlete wants to be thinking. What's the next millimeter of progress? Getting an inspired idea, executing on that, and creating it and feeling the overwhelming excitement of having accomplished that, then the next, and then the next. Always looking up and saying, that's the goal. I don't want to take my eye off of that, but I want my focus to be on the next millimeter of creation, and eventually I get there. I go to college and I get to play football. I didn't get to be a linebacker like I was in high school. I got to be a free safety. Now, I don't want to pretend it was any longer than it was because I joked with you, Danny, that every day a body part weakened and every week a body part failed. After my first year, I was running out of body parts. It was clear. I still remember the day sitting on my bed in the dorm going, I am not going to be Nick Bonacani. If anybody remembers him, linebacker for the Miami Dolphins. 5'10", 210 pounds. It's not going to happen. No matter what I do, that's not possible. So what did I do? I set a new goal, a new dream, and I brought everything I developed there and applied it to the next one, and to the next one, and to the next one. And as I've shared with you, there hasn't been a day go by that I don't pull from a lesson learned during that process of creation to the best athlete I could be, which was only going to play at a certain level for so long. That's reality. And for the vast majority of athletes watching this, that's true. But don't go, well, I'll never get to play. Be the very best you can be, and then you get to take all that you learned in the millimeters, not the fantasy. You fantasize, you're going to be terribly discouraged. Oh, this is a celebration. Then you apply it to the next part of your life. Danny, you played for West Point, right? That's pretty cool. That's right. Military Academy.
I went through one of those shifts as well. My first year was Coach Munkin's first year, and it was really cool to see him transform a culture. Folks, Coach Munkin was just on a podcast, the Andrew Brenneman podcast, I think it's called. Tells great stories from 2014 of how he built that culture. But one of the first things he did after a year was he cut about 40 freshmen and sophomores, and I was one of them. And I had this big identity shift because I was living in this fantasy, this visualized. I was visualizing my entire life playing D1 ball. My family, my dad played at West Point, uncles played at West Point. I was supposed to play at West Point, and now I'm here as a freshman in my spring of my freshman year, no longer a football player, and it didn't happen the way that I wanted it to. It was just kind of cut out of nowhere. Now I'm in this identity. I was like in an identity crisis because I was a football player. Like 20, I was 21 years old, pretty much 21 years, and having to make that shift as an individual. And now it's almost recalibrating those millimeters. Okay, now what do I want to do? I'm still a cadet. Next thing was being an Army officer. Okay, now how can I go be an Army officer? Where am I going to reset my compass, and how am I going to go put those millimeters to now get to this new goal and almost find a new identity? It was in me. I was the same person, and Danny Davis is not just a football player. I just kind of almost had to refine myself at the time. So I can really kind of relate to that story a lot.
I'm just thinking of going back to my high school. 10 years out. And I go in the gym, and there's somebody there that I played football with in high school who did 4 years of college in a Division III school, who was working out for a tryout with an NFL team. And 4 years out of college, couldn't let it go. He had fantasized to such a degree that if that didn't happen, his life was over. Now, that happens more often than we would like to talk about. If we're living in the millimeters, creating the most we can, there will be a day when most athletes, the vast majority, will reach the level of their maximum capacity. And now you get to apply it to something else in life. You're building a crazy cool company. And you shared with me, I didn't study in school anything that I'm doing now. But how often, Danny, are you using lessons learned on that football field? I think about one, for an example, playing hurt. What happens when you're not feeling very good?
Still got to show up.
Take a day. No, you show up. That is so cool that an athlete learns to show up no matter how they're feeling. What a great lesson to bring into life. And you and I talked about that. I don't want to discourage anyone from pushing their athletics to the professional level. Oh man, that was something I want to do. And I would support anybody and be able to accomplish that. But to be able to take that gifting and be able to apply it to something else in their life and create a great career, because in the NFL, we know that the average career is 3 years long. Once you get there, it's only 3 years long.
If you get there.
If you get there. So at some point in time, you might be 36 years old. Now you played in the league for 15 years, right? That's a big career. Only 36. Mahomes, his agent, Lee Steinberg. Lee is so cool. He gets somebody as a client. I just use him as an example. I love agents like this who immediately have them begin building businesses that will replace their NFL income whenever their career ends. So they get to have a natural transition out of football into the next part of their life. Because they want to live till they're 80 years old or older. And sometimes the longer they play, sometimes there's struggles with that. We know life expectancy is about 55. Because of the brain injuries, etc., from concussions, which he also works on. But we have an entire life beyond athletics if you reach the pinnacle. So anybody watching this, if you're going to be playing football, for an example, this fall, go and maximize every practice. Every practice. Be the first around the track. Be the first one in between the drills. Be the first one to stand up and volunteer. Be that person, because that translates directly into your athletic career and any other career you have in life. This is a great place to practice building in millimeters. And if you've got the gift of vivid visualization, as Danny has, I think you and I have got a clearer vision now, Danny, that you bring that vision to the millimeter. Get an inspired idea about executing it. For an athlete watching this, a practice, what are you going to do today in practice? You're just going to get through Tuesday? Going to just get through Wednesday? How are you going to show up today? What are you going to do a little different? Where do you want to improve your skill set today so that you're a better athlete that can perform at a higher level on Saturday when you play the game? What a way to live. What a way to live. That's how you use your vivid visualization. And then you execute on Saturday the very best you can, and you celebrate that, giving that gift to your teammates and inspiring them all week long to do that too. Chances of victory go up exponentially, highest they can be. What a great way to live.
What a difference hearing you just describe that person to where we started the conversation of the athlete who, man, I got to go to practice today. got to go to Tuesday practice. I have to. This mundane. It's so easy to fall into that trap. And I would almost argue that we're almost trained to go through that trap or go through that path of thinking. What would be one of the biggest ways to get someone out of that course of thinking and get them to where it's, I get to go do this. I'm envisioning this goal. I'm purpose driven. Is there any one catalyst that someone can do to get them out of that brain fog, out of that level of thinking, to be the person that they're actually made to be?
Sure. I'll give you a simple technique and a place you're going to want to, fence post you're going to want to hook to. Get out a 3x5 card and just write these words. I want to, and put a quotation mark around the I. We talked about the observer's chair. That's you sitting in the observer's chair. I want to. I get to. I choose to. Now, you've got a habit of thinking that may not want to. Then you write down, I will command, and my habits of thinking will obey my command. I will act now. So I want to, I get to, I choose to. I will command, and my habits of thinking will obey my command. I will act now. And you take that 3x5 card and you put it on your nightstand, right where when you wake up in the morning, you pick it up and you start reading it. I want to, I get to, I choose to. I will command, and my habits of thinking will obey my command. I will act now. You'll know immediately whether you're in charge or whether you've got an unhealthy habit of thinking in charge. If you're listening to, I want to, I get to, I choose to, this is so stupid. Why am I doing this? I hope nobody's watching. You know who's in charge. It's your habit of thinking. It's not you, but it's very real. And if you leave it in charge for the rest of the day, your classwork, your practice, everything's going to have the same obligatory have to, need to, should energy. Now, put one by your nightstand, one by the refrigerator, one by your workstation where you can do your homework or your classwork, and put one on your car if you drive to class, or your bicycle if you bicycle. You want to be able to refresh this memory, this routine 4 or 5 times a day. Because if you've got obligatory energy, it doesn't just shift because you choose to. It requires thinking again and again and again and again. You're going to slowly plant these seeds. They'll grow into a new neural pathway, and then the brain can synaptically prune the bad habit. That's a practice that you can use to help shift it. At a deeper level, you're going to want to hitch to the post of passion. Passion is not excitement. Passion is a willingness to suffer for something you love. Willingness to suffer. That means you're going to get a clear vision of what it is you want to create. Create, not just have. I want to create this. Millimeter. What am I going to create today? If I had you wired to a functional MRI, those tabs on your head, have you seen those?
Mm-hmm.
And you have one of those inspired ideas, we would register a gamma spike. That's the fastest brainwave. It's immersive. It lights up part of our brain that's normally dormant. It ignites our passion. Our willingness to work without counting the cost or tracking the time, doing whatever is required to create that intangible reality. Feeling that energy? So if you've been in fantasy, just wanting to have it, I just want to have that. I just want to play in the pros. Get out of that. Come back to something that's current. I want to get to this speed level. I want to get to this strength level. Then start working toward that. Igniting the passion. Walking into the weight room. What am I going to do today with these weights? Without a weight coach, the strength coach working with me, on my own, what am I going to do today? You might pick up a barbell that's 5 or 10 pounds heavier. You might do it till it burns out. You are going to push it a little bit more than you normally would. Because why? You have this vision of creating this today. And you do that, You take your essential amino acids and you drink your protein and you do all the stuff. By the time you get here, your strength is going to be exponentially higher, not because you're older, because you paid the price. And it wasn't boring, mundane, burdensome, repetitive, and hard. It was passion-driven. You created it. You celebrated it. You were excited about it. Passion is a really key piece to this process. And you have the gift that generates it, the vivid visualization. Too many of us use it to escape and avoid and go into easy, just want to have it handed to me. Or we go into catastrophe. We start playing out worst-case scenarios. That's a really dangerous place as well. We want to stay in creation on the next millimeter and taking the action, passion-driven, a willingness to suffer for something I love. There's a price to be paid. Danny, you'd agree with me. We talked about this. We live in a world where people aren't willing to pay the price for anything. They just want to have it. Well, if they give it to me, I'll take it. But create it? You want me to pay the price to create this? Oh, athletics is one of the most beautiful playgrounds in which you can pay the price to create. You get to learn how to do everything in life. Every business you build, every job you take on, everything is exactly the same. Day at a time, a millimeter at a time, a vision at a time, passion-driven energy to grow. Those who create a lot, they live passion-driven. They grow passion-driven. I'm 72 years old. I had somebody say to me, when are you going to retire? And I said, to what? To what? To retire would be to die. I want to live. I want to grow. I want to become the best of whatever it is I'm going to be. And the day will come when my body fails and I die, and that's great, and I'll have a zero regret. That's how we want to live. And athletics sets the stage for us to do that while we're in athletics and the rest of our lives. This morning, 72, my wife and I went on a ridiculous mountain bike ride. It was awesome. We rode so hard for an hour. It was so cool. And we got home and we sat in the garage and just had a moment. Wow. To be able to do this at 72?
That's huge. That's huge. That's what it's about right there. I love it. I love it. Before we jump back into the show, a quick shout out to one of our proud sponsors, Gardner Roofing. If you're looking for a roofer you can trust, Gardner Roofing has been Colorado's go-to team since 1998. They're family owned, built on integrity, and they treat every roof like it's their own. Whether it's repairs, a full replacement, or just a free inspection, Gardner Roofing is the name Colorado trusts. Check them out at gardnerroofs.com or give them a call at 303-332-6224. Gardner Roofing, their family has your family covered. Let's switch gears just a little bit here. We've been talking a lot about the individual level and how the habits affect an individual, but you've also spent a lot of times working with organizations and running these habit assessments across entire teams, helping leaders understand how people function together. And when you're dealing with high-performing teams, especially in competitive environments, you often get a room full of type A personalities, driven, intense, sometimes it's very tough to mesh those together. So for anyone who's a part of a team or leading one, what would be your advice for creating that real collaboration and how teams can get the most out of a person's unique strengths without letting that so-called alpha energy clash and slow down progress?
Great question, Danny, and thank you. One of my exciting offers to a corporate entity, for example, have everybody in a team, like a management team or a sales team or a customer service team, take the Habit Finder assessment, individual assessments. Then I crunch those into what we call a team DNA report. It tells me the habits of thinking that team has in common. And there's generally 4 or 5 of them that are like 80 to 97% they have in common, especially when you get into like a sales team. Now, I could tell you the 4 they have. That's almost always shows up because they attract the same kinds of people. And then we say, let's focus on teaching principles, practices, and processes for shifting those habits and using and maximizing those gifts in your organization to get the best return on investment. Danny, we designed this team DNA. One, it's very effective, but it's also very affordable. Today's training budgets are pretty slim, and they go through the kind of the flavor of the month training, and it's like it lasts for a few days and then doesn't work, so maybe they get there something different, and that doesn't work, and so they try something different. This isn't about a flavor of the month. This is about shifting habits of thinking so that everyone can show up on their very best behavior. We're not shifting all of the habits that are unhealthy, just the biggest ones that are contributing to challenges in an organization. I'll give you an example. Publicly traded company, government contractor, producing parts. Now, I won't be specific because I'll keep it confidential. Their only source of profit is incremental improvement. The end user wants the best price. The raw materials wants the highest price. The employees want the most income, and the stockholders want the greatest profit, right? That everybody wants something, but in the middle, the only way to make a profit in a company like that is to charge the same amount, but produce it for less money. That's incremental improvement. We did the assessment on the 4 silos: production, production, engineering, my mind just went blank, sorry, safety. And we found in those silos that 100% of each one of those groups, manufacturing, that's what the other one's missing, manufacturing, those 4 silos, we've never seen it before. Matter of fact, I delivered a paper at the Hartman Institute in the University of Tennessee on this study because 100% of all of them had one thought process in common. It's a thought process that caused them to think about thinking a lot. They were obsessive thinkers. Now, there's vivid thinking and then there's effortless thinking. This was effortless thinking. And the single greatest risk of people thinking a lot is getting attached to their ideas and then needing to be right. To hope somebody's watching this and smiling and go, oh my goodness, that's the business I'm in. Everybody needs to be right. It's pretty hard to create incremental improvement when everybody needs to be right about their position. So after we did this, I sat with management. I said, there's one area we'll want to focus on. In between the shifts, let's block out an hour. Let me go into these 4 silos and let me share with them the principles that govern letting go of the need to be right and getting into collaboration. They said, great, let's do that. So we did that. Now this young creative engineer walks out to this crusty old production guy and instead of saying, this is what we're going to do, he said, here's what we want to overcome. What's your idea? They'd find good in the idea. Oh, what I like best about that idea is this. What would you think if we added this to the idea? Oh, yeah, then we could do this. And then someone would chime in over here. In a few months, they solved millions of dollars in crises, challenges they had not been able to solve, to be able to manufacture things for a lower price, be able to charge the same price. That's incremental improvement. That's an exciting thing to be able to do in an organization. And we were able to, by having everybody take the assessment, crunch it into Team DNA, identify something that once it was identified, and I said, do you ever have a problem with? It was like, yeah, you do. 100% of your people are here. We attacked that one and solved it and changed the culture, I would say, of collaboration in that particular company. Those things can be done now because of the accuracy of the assessment. Team DNA. That's how we solve the problem and address the economics that people are facing right now.
Right. And I'm a big Office fan, and I'm thinking about the time where Michael puts together a suggestion box meeting and everyone puts in their suggestions, and it didn't go as well, but you can imagine this happening at a company, and it's very emotion driven, very observing driven, very just like surface level things. But when you put in these systems, when you do this team DNA, the health assessment that's driven off of data, and that is not subjective, or that's not opinion based, but it's it's the facts right here, and you're coaching through that, you're communicating through that, and it really helps build that culture instead of just talking about building that culture. So what's one of the biggest things that you've seen when really being able to have something in front of you to talk about versus, hey, let's just come together and talk about our biggest frustrations with one another?
It's very interesting when I hear someone say, gosh, in the last hour I've learned more about myself than I did with 20 years of therapy. Now, nothing against therapy. It's very, very critical and has its place. But the accuracy with which we can get to the real issues very quickly is sometimes a little offsetting for some people. They're going, whoa, yeah. But keep in mind, it's not you. You're fine. You're priceless. Danny, that's a habit. Is it serving you? And if not, what would you think about shifting it? Let's change this. But it's very interesting to be able to, as we did, in an hour, go really deep into all of those 36 habits of thinking and find out which ones are really serving you. If someone's got a challenge with self-esteem, sometimes there's a risk that someone might take it personally. We work through that carefully. But who wouldn't want to be the best version of themselves? It's like so confused sometimes. Let's take away the confusion. I'd like to create this, but I just can't figure out how. I'll let us show you how. Once you know what's happening and you can learn how to use, because we're talking about vivid visualization being an enormous gift, if it's used constructively. If it's not, fantasy is very destructive. Catastrophe is very destructive. But if you have the gift and you know how to use it properly, you can create amazing things with these gifts. So I would have to say one of the most exciting things for me is to see someone who's had this gift, that one and many others, who didn't really know it. They didn't know it was a gift. All they know is it's been a burden. It's been a frustration. To learn how to use their gifts properly. Interestingly enough, some of the greatest challenges people face are not because of weakness. It's because of gifting. You alluded to this a moment ago. Vivid visualization, used destructively to go into fantasy, to create an expectation, and then be disappointed. The number one cause of self-esteem challenges, where we question our worth and our worthiness, our ability, our character, the value of our ideas, the value of our contribution, past mistakes, the number one cause is an unmet expectation created by the destructive use of a gift. If that could be changed to be used constructively, it immediately starts to shift someone's self-worth. Wow, that's incredible. To watch that shift occur in someone's life is just so rewarding.
I bet.
That's what I live for.
And folks, that's just such great insight. And if you're out there, you have an idea, you're looking to find something, it doesn't necessarily have to be a business or a company or a product, but you want to create something. You want to get on this passion journey. This assessment and this what we're talking about here, you might be getting in your own way without even knowing it, because you've just been doing it for so many years. Having this sort of insight, this sort of mathematical data, this coaching, it could be what you're missing and kind of get you to that next phase. Now, you have to want to be there, and for anyone that doesn't want it, there needs to be some sort of internal trigger that no amount of coaching or data is going to turn that trigger on for you. It needs to come from inside. But if you're there now and you're looking for something, you're looking to have your compass might be lost, might be looking where to go, this is a great point, great starting point to maybe catalyst you into where you want to be, to really find that passion and be who you're truly made to be. Dave, this has been a phenomenal conversation. We talked a lot about, the mental performance, how it really impacts the physical performance, and all these moving parts in your brain are helping you, or might be hindering you from really seeing reality clearly. Dave, where can people find you at and learn some about the great stuff that you're doing, and maybe even go take this habit assessment themselves?
Well, I know you're going to be putting 2 very special links that we're going to be using for them to take the assessment. They're free. We decided to make them free because we want people to have the experience. It's so unique to go into this space. I don't want to try to explain it to you. I want you to experience it. So Danny will provide you with a link to be able to take the Habit Finder assessment. He's also going to give you the opportunity to take a new assessment we just created 15 months ago. If anybody here has been struggling with their health and they'd like to shed some pounds, these thought processes, we've identified the ones that create resistance to being on a program and getting healthy, the ones that create the noise that the brain tries to anesthetize with food, and the ones that show up after we eat the dozen donuts. I mean, it's right there in front of you. Extremely powerful. I've just almost been alarmed with how deep that particular assessment can go in helping someone on their health journey. So if you ever struggle with your health and you want to lose some weight, take that assessment as well, because that's a very unique assessment. Same design, same mathematics, just a little bit different bias toward health, getting healthy and staying healthy. But Danny will share that with you. That's the very best thing to do. And then we could find a way to help you walk through those assessments. We're going to be doing some assessment debriefs where you can come and attend a group and find out more about your results. And then after you've done that, go, is this something I would really like to invest in? And then we can talk to you about different options for taking on your habits of thinking. But this is laser-driven, focused coaching. This isn't a general conversation about life. This is really taking on those habits so that you can be the best version of yourself. But we're excited to be able to serve you at any level that you're ready and willing. But the assessment itself and the debrief is free.
That's awesome. Folks, go check it out. Again, highlight, it's free. I've taken it myself. I've gone through the coaching. It really changed my perception of life, and I feel like I'm now starting to see a little bit clearer, and not just some of the perceptions that I've trained my body to do or my mind to do over the past 30 years now. So go check it out, folks. We'll put the links in the description. They're there on the screen for you. That's it for this episode of the Gridiron Unfiltered. Big thanks to Dave Blanchard for joining us and helping us understand just how powerful the mental game is. Make sure you subscribe to the Fan Day Nation so you don't miss out on future episodes. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.